Nine Brides, Chapter 4, Part 2 of Trouble on Peckerwood. She was gone. Perhaps only a little way. Perhaps she'd fallen neck deep into new trouble. He studied the snow. Though flint hard, it showed scratches where she'd made for the ridge. He strode after, fearing to find her lying somewhere in the aching dawn cold. But the scratches led up and over the summit and down the other side. That bandaged knee had stood up mighty well. Or a fear of another cup of his granny's tonic had fitted her with wings. Yonder was hardy territory, unsound ground for a Trevitt, but he followed the marks down anyhow. 7 miles he followed, to the edge of a clearing. A battered house stood on its far side, with smoke rising straight and thin from a stick and clay chimney. Figures could be seen. That would be Burley Hake hoisting the bale of fodder lightly as a poke of feathers. That would be Jim laying open a 2-foot chunk of firewood with an axe blow. Gristle Hard Obe and Stringy Paw Hardy moved between house and sheds. Hub Trevitt should have turned, but there was no concealing his tracks. Obe, Jim, or Hake Hardy, or their leathery old man would find them and buzz over them like hornets, and read the girls there too, even if she'd crept into the house unnoticed. Hub had his winter work to tend to, and was not minded to spend a season dodging shots, or maybe not always dodging them. He'd go straight to the house and tell the Hardys the facts. He stepped out on the meadow and yelled. The 4 figures looked up startled, and then dived for cover. With the shyness of folk not given to neighboring, they simply ducked. Empty hands in plain view, Hub crossed the clearing and mounted the sagging front step and rapped. It was the first call of a Trevitt to the Hardy homestead since Grandpa Bash Trevitt cracked those wedding guest heads together and scooped up Clag Hardy's woman. He thumped again. The silence was long, but after a spell the door opened a handspan. Pa Hardy's eyes were ice blue. His cheeks were caved, his mustache broken-winged, his expression bleak. He'd been pinked once in a swap of bullets, and his left arm wasn't much. I take it you know me. I'm Hub Trevitt. Hub's voice sounded brittle to his own ears. Old Herbert Hardy stood as if frozen. Said Hub, I'm sorry Trevitts and Hardys haven't always got along together. I don't aim to stir up shooting again. My business is plain trapping. He wished the head of the Hardy tribe would say something. Were the girl's 3 brothers closing in behind Hub's back? He tried again. I don't expect we should like each other, but we should stop grudge holding. Peering through the slit with his right hand out of sight, the old man found voice. The words whipped like buckshot. I been fixin' to look you up soon as the chores are done. What's this tale my girl's tellin'? So she does know how to talk, thought Hub. Wonder what kind of tell she made of it. He stated bluntly, I found her in my pit trap. I don't know what brought her there. You should keep your kin closer to home. But I want you should know I laid no hand on her that wasn't honest, including a mite of tonic. She was hurt, and I did what I could for her. I gave her my bed and slept out. The eyes in the gaunt face didn't shift. Kedron! Kedron, thought Hub, so that's her name. The floor creaked. The door crack widened. She stood beside her pa, a slight figure in a loose, skimpy dress. Her face colorless and without expression, her corn silk hair down her back. He marveled that he'd ever thought her pretty. She looked through Hub and past him as if he were a tree. Pa produced his big rifle. Do you want he should marry you? No! Hub jumped as if gaffed. Marry? Nothing had been farther from his head. You want I should nail him? Skin and hair to the barn? Hit's nothing to me. Her voice was toneless. Her eyes still looked through him without seeing. He says he didn't do you scratch nor folly. Is that Bible truth? Hit's truth. Get, Pa Hardy said to Hub Trevitt. Hub turned and left. No one else was in sight, but he sensed with every nerve end that muscular Obe, Hake, and Jim were watching hungrily. If they wanted to drill him or jump him, now was their chance. If they didn't now, the truce would endure on the mountain, most like. Though why their sister had crossed the deadline was a puzzle. Hub marched across the clearing and made his way up the long slope. Not even a playful bucket of bird shot rang after him. He was glad he'd called, glad he'd faced the issue. It could have come out worse. He was sorry, though, that the Hardys refused to forget old scores. A Hardy getting caught in a Trevitt bear trap hadn't shortened the list of Hardys made to look ridiculous. Though that one had almost nailed him too, he found himself thinking. Her pa put it up to her. She didn't want me to marry her. Grab, what a squeak. He scaled the slope a trifle faster and darted over the crest as if a whole tribe of hardy women were after him, bright-haired, scrawny, each wrapped in whatever came handy. For the next weeks, Hub Trevitt tramped his solitary way, spreading a trapper's table for the wild things. Clover honey, frog eggs, and skunk scent for the wily red fox. Apple as well as carrot for the muskrat. He set drag poles for the bobcat. He boiled or smoked his traps, or bound them against human taint with the aromatic hemlock withes. When gale slanted down, he holed up in the cabin and stretched skins. He had wood, grub, tobacco, and his own company, which had always been good. What more could a man ask? Toward January's end, he noticed a change in himself. But it was a mood that came with the prolonged storms. Muscles grew cramped from being cabin-bound. Tobacco became tasteless. Well, the hut had been used by a long line of Winter & Trevitts and was stocked for idle hours. Hub took down some seasoned hickory that lay across the rafters. He whittled a set of chair rounds, and back slats too. The latter he boiled and bent. From a chunk of white oak he'd rived out thin, strong splints and wove them into a seat frame. Down at the home place in Cat Track Hollow, there were more little straight satin chairs like this than Trevitt bottoms to use them, and a few more were generally on sale at the Toller Mountain store. When a spell of false warmth brought the sap up into the maple trees, Hub took moments from his trap tending to cut posts from a 2-inch limb. He lopped them to a short pair and a long, and gave the long pair a bending so as to ease the sitters back. Dry hickory rounds and slats driven into green maple hold forever without nails or glue. Soon after winter clomped down again, Hub had his chair all made, and even Uncle Tate, who was a master, would have approved the handiwork. But the false spring had done something to Hub, as it had to the sugar trees. It left him glumming and restless. He scowled at the chair he'd finished. He put it in one corner and in another. He tucked it aside, dissatisfied. Finally, he climbed up and fished around the rafters for 2 light slabs of walnut, fine and straight-grained. What was yeasted in his mind had never been there before, and it angered him, but he decided to give way to it. This was hard whittling, for the slabs were dry and tough with age, but they began to take shape. When out on his trap line, he pushed them up from his mind, but at evening he lifted the pile of skins where he kept them hid, brought them forth, and fell to shaving and scraping. They became slender, pointed, curvy. Their dainty ounces of gray-brown wood grew sleek as a mink's fur under his rubbing. Every chair maker knows that hickory, oak, or maple will creep all over a puncheon floor, but walnut won't creep, and that's what makes it the onlyest material for runners to a rocking chair. Yet what in his trapper's hut did a 6'3" solitary man want of a chair that rocked? Might as well set it in a lady's lap. Oh well, as soon as winter was done, he'd take it to the holler and give it to Granny Height or Lavisi Vasi or one of the old maid cornets. Yet to a womanless man, it was a comfort just to spy that little chair when he came home from his long tramps. Seemed like it nodded when he touched it. He purely given it a graceful balance. On this particular evening of late March, Hub came in, and he halted. The little chair was drawn up with its toes pointed toward his stove. That's how he'd left it, the chair being too big for hiding. But it wore a knowing air, as if it could tell something. And indeed it could. On one side of it was his stool, on the other, a basket. Hub snatched up the basket. It was crammed to the top with pucon roots and madder plants and alder roots, dyes every one for pretty baskets such as this. He dashed out and ran for the thicket that hid the bear pit. This time the trap hadn't been disturbed, but that tangled ball of ripped-down honeysuckle vines had been gathered up and lugged away toward the ridge. He followed while there was light. It was an easy trail marked by the chaff and litter of the vines. Honeysuckle strands are fine for baskets. On this side of Peckerwood, they grew 25 feet long. On the other side, like all else, they grew scrubbly and knotty. So vines for basketry were what brought Kedron poaching last December. He saw it now. That's what led her to tumble into the pit. And she wanted those vines badly enough, even to steal back for them a second time. But she needn't have poked into his cabin. She must have peeked first and spied the chair. Had it roused her laughter? Had she crazily judged him lonesome? Couldn't she tell he made it for one of the cornets, or for Aunt Effie Tidney, or for putting up to sell at the Toller store? By what right had she dassed to sneak in and try it, and draw up his stool beside it? Anger took Hub for this piece of hardy impudence. He ran back to the cabin, snatched up the dainty chair, bore it outside, and whirled it high. Broke it across his chopping block. Brought an axe down on it for finisher, blade and head. Smashed it to bits like the chaff of the honeysuckle, and stalked in and cooked supper. It was time, he realized, for getting down off this mountain. Skins of woodland creatures were beginning to turn red anyhow, and fur yellow, sign that the trapping season was over. In the morning he'd pull out for the holler. But this morning, a sagging in his legs hit him. A dewless mood buckled his knees. It made him want to sit all day on his doorstep, soaking up the sun. It kept him there watching the butterflies caper and cut like painted leaves on the soft air, watching the squirrels spin about the tree trunks and pounce and grapple in a whirling blur. He found himself yearning to plink a dulcimer, which was a cockeyed seizure if there ever was one, for he had neither the lap harp nor the art. He decided what he needed was a bowl of Granny Aurelia Trevitt's tonic tea, and he shambled in and brewed some, though the smell of the stuff forced his head aside. Even by holding nose, he couldn't down it. No wonder Kedron had fought like a wild cat when he poured the mixture into her. The memory of her fists and flailing elbows stirred a tingle. He discovered with a surge that Aurelia's fearful toddy wasn't what he honed for. What he craved was a wrestle, a fight, a grip and tug of bodies, equal matched and angry. Obe Hardy's big carcass would be just the thing, or that raw bone strength of Jim Hardy, or the crouching cunning and lynx quick pouncing of Hake. After a man's been cabined up with himself for a winter, he needs a ruckus, and those were the three men of violence and sound and durable hatred who'd give it. He'd pull up his tracks, pack his catch, set for the home farm tomorrow. Today he was spilin', pining, and panting for a fight.